Hello, everyone. I'm Kristin Judge, the founder of the Cybercrime Support Network and a Women Leaders of the World Fellow. And today is our very first LinkedIn Live Let's Talk Leadership. And I'm so excited to have Julie Castro Abrams on the very first inaugural show for Let's Talk Leadership. And of course, it's the International Women's Day was just last week and all, so it's a great time to be here. And Julie, could you please introduce yourself and how women lead?
Kristin, it's so great to be here and just honored to see your leadership in action. I'm Julie Castro Abrams. I'm the CEO of a nonprofit called How Women Lead. And we have a couple different arms of the work that we're doing. We also have a grant making program that's a giving circle called How Women Give. And we launched a venture fund called How Women Invest. So we have a couple different entities, and our whole goal is to achieve equity for women.
That's a lot to take on, but you've done such a fantastic job at it already. How many women are involved in How Women Lead?
Today it's 13,000 women. What's kind of interesting is a year ago, we're celebrating a year of being shut down in the Bay Area because of the pandemic. A year ago, everything we were doing was in person, and now it's virtual. So we've exploded the number. So many more people are taking advantage of our programming, and a lot outside the Bay Area. So it's completely turned our business model on its head, if you will.
Yeah, it's really, and I was fortunate enough to be Women Leaders of the World Fellow, and I was so excited I was going to be able to come to this beautiful area outside of San Francisco. We ended up doing it virtually, but the group really did bond regardless of where we were, which was really a testament to your leadership and the people that you've put in charge of these programs. Dive in a little bit more for me, if you would, about what are some of the goals of How Women Lead?
Our goal is really to all loop arms as women who've had a lot of leadership experience and identify change we want to make in the world. Unfortunately, for all the progress we've made as women and women in leadership in our country, some of the numbers are still so anemic, it's painful. So for me, it's all about changing till we get to 50-50. Like that's got to be the goal.
Yeah, and we're getting a little better in Congress. I mean, this last freshman class, we're definitely getting more diversity in there. So I want to ask you a little bit, how do you see that you're changing the landscape of the female founders? You talked about some of your investments and grant making. How are you helping female founders? Being one myself, that's sort of important to me.
Yeah, well, congratulations, because it takes a lot of courage and conviction in your mission to really step out and take a risk and create your own thing. One of the things that we're, what we know is 40% of all companies are started by women, so nearly half. And it really is a critical option for women at different parts of their lives. Some of them are building these fast growth big companies, but many of them are starting companies, and they, success to them is 2 or 3 employees. So women are starting businesses of all kinds, but what we know is women hire 6 times more women than companies run by men. So right now this year, unfortunately, we just got some new data. We're at a 33-year low in women's employment. 5.3 million women have left the workforce. This is a crisis, and the president has actually claimed that as well. But one of the things that we know is women founders, all companies, new companies start up in big numbers during economic downturns. Probably no surprise, because you don't have a job and you've been thinking about starting this company for a long time. Obviously, this is the time to do that, right? So if we can deploy capital well and advice and support for these women entrepreneurs, we can really fuel new job growth big time for women. So one of the numbers that I specifically want to address is capital for women. Only 2% of venture capital dollars are going to women-founded companies. It is outrageous and egregious, and it's such a private, closed system that there's not much you can do to legislate or regulate. Now what we need to do as women is to step into our power and our influence and our wealth and start investing in women-founded companies. That is absolutely the solution, because men are not going to fund those companies. They don't see the value. They don't actually understand women leaders well enough. It's evidenced by when you look at the numbers, which are so outrageously low.
Yeah, I have been trying to play a little bit in that space, and I do feel, certainly we have a lot of phenomenal men that support CSN on our board and our funders and all, but I have felt in certain circles that, even for nonprofit giving, maybe people are not looking at our organization as much as they might a male-led organization. So I actually had some mentors recommend to me to bring some of the men from my board to bigger pitches, which I thought was interesting. But, it's something that we have to be at the table. If there's more women on boards, then there's more women also in the giving and the decision making. So I know you're doing a lot about board membership.
We are, but I just want to let you know, you are not just noticing something that is only uniquely experienced by you. In the nonprofit sector, the vast majority of the dollars and all the largest companies, nonprofit entities, are run by white guys. So unfortunately, the bias that we have in our country about women's leadership, the decision-making people go through, kind of mirrors what you see in a lot of companies. So this is what we see. Men are asked questions about their potential, and it's both in hiring, but it's absolutely well documented in venture capital. So it's like, how big can this get? And what is this guy capable of? Women are asked questions about prevention. We are asked questions about, what have we done? How can we prove that we've already done the thing they're going to hire us for? And also, what is the risk that's possible with this company and investing in the
there's
company?
research to back. This is research based. This is not just anecdotal.
No question about it. And so because of that, this is the thing. Women venture capitalists see the value in women-founded companies more powerfully. They invest more equitably when they invest. So until women start stepping into financing those companies, taking those board seats, being a venture capitalist, we're going to continue to have to just fight against the bias that we all have bias. It is a long trajectory to change bias. So while we're in the bias changing business, we also need to be in the women stepping into our power and doing it with each other and for our sisters. We have been able to tackle this issue very effectively with a huge concerted effort in the board space that you just mentioned. So, in 2008, I think there were like 8% of public companies had women on their board, or 8% of public company directors were women, which is just outrageous, because we had decades of information at that point that if you have diversity on a board, companies perform better. In fact, recalls happen 3 times faster, Kristin. That means people can die because of the impact of groupthink, where everybody thinks the same because you're all, you lower your guard because you feel like, oh, well, Joe and I went to the same school. We've had the same experience. I'm just going to let him do the homework and I'll do whatever he says.
And you don't challenge. You don't challenge the thinking in a positive way to grow.
Right. So despite all the data, people weren't changing the composition on those boards. And so there was beautiful women in our community, the 30% coalition, and then 20 women on boards, people who started really asserting big leadership and trying to move the needle. And it was a hard fight and took a long time, but we ultimately got, they're called asset management firms like State Street, that fierce girl, the beautiful statue of her looking at the bull on Wall Street. State Street, sponsored that. And State Street came out and said you had to have 2 women on your board or they were going to vote against your nominations and governance chair.
Amazing.
You weren't going to be able to have the leadership that you wanted because they have a lot of ownership companies. And then we got together with NABO and other people in California and passed legislation that frankly was much lighter weight, but in some ways kind of mirrored what's been happening in Europe for a long time, that required, like, if this is a public company and the public can invest in it, we have a responsibility to make sure it's governed well. And that's the premise behind this, is you need diversity, not just for all the experience and good ideas and the representation for the community that happens when you have diversity on those boards, but literally our behavior changes when diversity is in the room. It upgames everybody. So everybody performs better. And we see 26% better financial returns when we have diversity on boards.
Again, numbers. These are numbers. Yeah. This is research. This is not Julie and Kristin's ideas. This is the real hard facts here.
Well, and now in California, as of last year, we had 26% of a certain Russell 3000 index. 23% of those directors are women. That's public companies because we can legislate them. But private companies, some of which are brand new baby startups, but some of them are family owned and have been around for 200 years. And others are pre-IPO fast growth unicorns like, Airbnb just went public, right? So there's a huge, very different kinds of companies in that space. But women, only 5% of women who are what we call an accredited investor, which just means you made $200,000 a year for the last 2 years in a row. There are a couple different definitions of it, but let's use that as a proxy. It's not the highest bar in the world, right? That is reasonable. And I think what we know is like 81 million families in the United States have met that accredited investor standard. That said, only 5% of women who are accredited investors are investing in venture, and 30% of men are. So women can and should step up into this space. And when we launched our venture fund, one of the things that we found is people were literally saying thank you for inviting them to be part of investing in a fund, because they really felt like there was never a door open for them. And it was quite emotional for people to think about walking into what is considered this bastion of power and influence. But I'm here to tell you, it is not rocket science. It shouldn't be exclusionary. And women, if we create funds run by women, we'll fund more women-founded companies, and we'll make more money for our limited partners, our investors.
Absolutely. Have they done any stats? I don't know, and I'm putting you a little bit on the spot. Do we know women-funded or women-led and founded companies, do they have a higher success rate as far as staying in business longer, or have you read anything about that?
They have 11% better returns for their investors is sort of an important thing for you to be thinking about. Now, longevity of those companies is an interesting question, because you've got companies that aren't venture backed, right? There are lots of people running companies that were around for 30, 40 years, of restaurants, whatever, right? That they're just running them. And so when I ran a microenterprise and microfinance organization that worked with low-income women to start their own companies, 70% were still in business 5 years later with consistent sales. So this is nothing to sneeze at. And on average, they had we had a statistician on staff. They had 2.3 employees. And one of the things we also found is that Latinas and then African-American women right behind them built more assets when they started their own companies. So there's beautiful story to address some of the things we're most concerned about in our country. We're concerned about Black and Latina women who are massively affected by COVID, both leaving the workforce and deaths. So there are a number of things in the ecosystem that I really think we should pay attention to.
Yeah. And I think it's good now that in some ways we're paying attention to it. It's sad that it's had to get so bad. I remember there was 1 week, maybe 3 weeks ago, that all of the new unemployment, like everybody that filed for unemployment was a woman or something.
Every single person in December. And all of the jobs lost in December were women of color. Yeah.
That's crazy. But we knew there was this issue underlying, but now it's front page news. So hopefully, we can get this momentum going while it's a crisis, so that it will continue to be something that we just pay attention to after the crisis.
We're at a 33-year low, actually, in women's employment. And think about just all of us I've worked my entire lifetime on these issues. And but 40% of households in the United States, the woman is the primary breadwinner. So this is not a women's issue. This is a family issue, and it's an economic issue for the whole country. When women are not working, families are in crisis. So we have got, as a country, and all of us together unified, have got to come together and address this issue.
Well, I know even on my team, we've had some people that have had to cut their hours. One actually had to leave because they had three young people at home being in
Right.
school, a husband who's deploying, and they had a job and a mom and a teacher and a caregiver. And at some point, I always say to my daughter and other girls that I mentor is, you can have it all, just probably not all at once.
Right.
So I did my time home with my kids. I was an elected official. I started my own company. I was a teacher. So I did a lot of things, just not all at one time. And with schools being closed lately and the COVID and different health issues, moms have been just stretched. I'm so thankful my kids aren't little right now. I don't know how I would do
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. Well, McKinsey has this Women in the Workforce report that they do. Now, let's be clear. This is McKinsey is doing research on corporate women, right?
Okay.
But what they found is the highest risk groups were Black women, working mothers, and very senior women, because they're holding the emotional labor for everyone in the company. So they also found that when you had a strong ally within the company, Black women stayed at the same rate as white women. So it's telling us that the environments we're creating are also they're not supportive and they're hostile. The other thing, of course, innovation happens in these downturns, right? And women are innovators. So women are innovating with a number of tech solutions we're seeing to address the crises that we're in. So there's some I don't know if you could call it a loophole or whatever, but if you are a stay-at-home mom, you can have up to 6 kids in your house and you don't have to go through a bunch of licensing. So there's some matchmaking technologies that are coming out that are connecting, working moms with moms who are staying home, as opposed to having to find a childcare facility that may or may not be available. We also have found there's a company called Hitch Works that is it's a marketplace for talent mobility. But the thing that I think is there's a number of different things that are reducing bias in companies and giving opportunities for projects as opposed to for women, so that you can have visibility into projects that are previously just given to the person, that proximity bias, like the person closest to me, I give the project to, but it's a platform, marketplace that allows people to find those projects in your own company. So you don't quit your job necessarily. You can take a project and say, I'm just going to do a project for a while. So there's all these
flexibility,
strategies and technologies that potentially can help us address it. But Kristin, this session is all about leadership and women's leadership. And there are a couple of things I want to share with the community that you already know. One, I've talked about how women, gathering arms and investing together, we can use our own wealth to solve some of these problems, but we can be better with each other. So we created a credo in our organization, and I want everyone in the United States to actually decide that we're going to buy into this credo. So the first one is we ask you to be fierce advocates for each other, and you model that so beautifully as a leader. And to me, that means it's no more of that mean girl behavior, that sort of sharp elbowed, the world's a pie and I've got my slice and you can't have one. Like that is so old behavior, and it is not acceptable in the country that we're living in right now. We also ask women to say yes to making introductions and helping each other. Men are better at this than we are. They'll make introductions if they meet somebody, but women really hold their connections very closely, strangely. And we need to trust each other more in making those introductions. We also ask you to say, to amplify someone's voice if they're not being heard. And we all know that sort of idea. You're the only woman in the room, or, one of few, and you say something in a meeting and nobody, pays attention. A couple minutes later, the guy has that same idea and everyone thinks he's brilliant. But there are all kinds of other ways that we can amplify each other's voices and make sure that they're being heard. Unfortunately, women's voices cannot be heard, and people can't hear what we say. So we have got to figure out how to amplify our voices. And then finally, we ask you to stand up and be unabashedly visible. And for a lot of women, we're like, I'll do all the back office stuff. I don't need to be on the front page or on the stage. but I'll remind you that our daughters are watching, and if you're not standing out there, she doesn't see somebody who looks like her. She's not learning from you, and it's super critical for us to step out and to really, stand in our power and our influence without being ashamed of that. And it's if we can do this, I believe we can shift some of this negative stuff. I mean, when Hillary Clinton was running for president, it was so obvious the awful things people would say. People who were in the Democratic Party and would normally vote for her kind of were like, oh, they're buying into this negative narrative about women leaders. And I just had some experience this week about Meghan Markle. Like, people are watching what's going on with her and Harry, her family, and they're like, "Oh, I never really liked her." Like, it's like, are you kidding me? Why are we bashing other women and not trusting them?
I loved her saying, or her one comment that was, you don't have to just choose Team Kate or Team Meghan. Like, you can like both of us.
Right.
If you hate one, you don't have to love the, like, whatever, however she said it. But it was really telling to me that, look, we don't have to be picking sides of which woman do you like better in this family, or, even in the boardroom, wherever, we have to be coming together and working together in tandem.
Assume first good intentions. Serena Williams had a beautiful response saying, I'm backing you up and I believe you, and your experience is your experience. You have a right to that experience. Right. She has a right to protect her family in whatever way makes the most sense for her. But Stanford has something called the Clayman Institute. It looks research on women's leadership, and one of the things they found is there's something called the likability penalty. Women struggle as leaders with ever being able to stand on that line of likability consistently. And we all, any of you who've been a leader, this. If you're too strong, they have negative words about you. If you're too weak, you're told that you're milquetoast. You're too emotional, or if you're too not emotional, like it is nearly impossible. And we have got to decide as women and men who are listening to, we will no longer tolerate that destructive behavior, because we need all the leadership we can get today.
That's right. If we wear pants, if we wear a skirt, I mean, there's just so many conversations around that. Right. What does our hair look like? But no one talks about the hair of male candidates,
Right.
No one ever talked about male candidates' hair.
Is she too this? Is she too that? She too old? Is she too, voice too high? Her voice too manly? I don't know. It's like bizarre. And we all do it, though. That's the thing. Women do it to each other. And so that's my request, is that we all really step back and think, am I being the best version of myself that I really want to be? Because a lot of this we have to undo and consciously choose to shift.
Well, I think so much of that comes from the leadership. So what I recognized in the fellowship I did at Women Leaders of the World is, when you first came on, this is 20 other women I've never met from all over the world, and you set a tone. I get chills thinking about it. You set a tone that we're here for each other. It was a safe space. And then Patricia and Claudia, who do such a great job of sort of putting a big virtual hug around everybody. Yeah. It was that leadership in the room of why we're here, and we're here in a safe space, that we were very vulnerable and willing to start talking right away with each other. So when there are women in our positions, we can then model and then give that space. And I can see some of the women in our team, they're sort of getting their muscle a little bit and getting their confidence, and like, wait, so people, one of them was like, I'm a doctor, and we're like, put the DR in front of your name on the Zoom. We're going to call you doctor. You should own that title. And I could see them once they were in that space and have that experience. I think they're now owning it as they keep moving forward. So what you're doing is so important, just putting women together in a safe place so they can learn how to support each other and not get a knife in the back, and see how that feels. So that was really, it was tangible to me how that was happening.
That makes me feel so good. And I have to say, you know, part of the structural design of this is that we're really seeking to address this isolation that happens for women leaders. It is so hard. You're getting lambasted all the time, right? And if you're running a nonprofit like you are, you have so many stakeholders.
Just a few.
Yeah, you need a couple people who are just there to have your back. Who aren't competing with you, who don't need anything from you and aren't expecting any reward, right? Just people who will be your personal board of advisors. So if you're in a leadership role and you're feeling like you're, you know, hanging out there in the wind and feeling vulnerable, it is surprising how many people will say yes if you give them a very clear framework and say, I want to ask you to be on my personal board of advisors for 1 year. I'm going to ask you for, you know, 2 half-an-hour calls a month, and that's it. Like, that's an example of how you would set up that leadership support request for you. And you'd be surprised. Not everyone will say yes because it's not the right time for them, but it is what you deserve and need in order for your leadership to flourish. I'll just remind everybody, like, we need all the leadership we can get. We desperately need you feeling. So don't think you have to do it all on your own. Seek support.
And seek programming. So I did a leadership program back in 2010. I have some dear friends out of that, some great skills. Then I did one with the Presidential Leadership Scholars with the Bush and Clinton and Bush and LBJ libraries, and met some incredible women there that I really could be myself among them, which was really the first time I had met a whole group of, 20 some women that I could just be me. And it was really life-changing. And then doing the Women Leaders of the World. So I really recommend that if you maybe see yourself as a leader, but you don't really feel like you're there yet, or if you are already in a leadership position, but need more support, get into these fellowships, apply for these. There's so many wonderful organizations like yours that give people, men and women, opportunities for leadership. And I think it was good for me to do one with a woman's leadership and then one with women and men. And I got different takes from both of those. Sure. But I've met people through those programs that they've done 3 or 4 or 5 leadership programs, and they just grow every time. And so the people that I mentor, I'm letting them know you should get into a leadership program, whether it's a local, Detroit leaders or whatever it may be in my community, a state one, a national one. I think that's really transformative.
Well, you're a very wise leader, Kristin. I think a lot of people, especially women, will sort of go to this, well, I have to take care of everybody else first. And while, that's a laudable thing to do, that proverbial put your oxygen mask on first. A lot of us don't invest in our own leadership development. We'll do it for our team. And so you're role modeling how critical it is for us to continue to sharpen our sword. And a lot of, we could do a session where it's, none of it's brand new information, but it's a reminder for you of what you know about leadership. Yes. It's like, let's ground again in what you already know.
Yeah, take that time to think about yourself and your leadership, because we don't take a lot of time for ourselves. It's just, especially women in these leadership roles, I've got my family to care for, myself to care for, my company to care for, my 25 team members to care for, and 2 dogs who need a lot of care, so it's important to carve that time out. And that's what the Women Leaders Fellowship let me do too. We just had such a nice time. I knew that I was going to have that 4 hours a week. I was going to be among friends. We did stretches, breathing, and then learning and growing and connecting. And I have a Post-it note on my bulletin board here in my room that says, you can't pour from an empty cup. Yeah. And use what's, on the teacup saucer. And so I wrote that down from being in that fellowship, and I look at it all the time. So I'm trying to make sure my calendar is more balanced and I get some more time for myself. And I'm actually not working 10 hours a day on the weekends anymore after your program. So I'm really, really in a better position to lead. I got myself an executive administrator to assist me with things. So like calendaring and awesome. So
and I assume as a result, you're more creative and have more power and energy in all your interactions throughout the week.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Huge difference.
You could do all the cleaning of the wastebasket, but as a reminder, here are the elements that you could either join our Women Leaders for the World Fellowship, or you can try and replicate this in your own life. One is we brought this cohort of women together to all learn together your leadership stance, your core values. What is that big, scary thing you want to do in the world? Like a true leadership reflection and reset. But then there's ongoing learning all year long as part of the fellowship. But also over time, we have webinars nonstop about your brand and all kinds of things about your leadership. But you also get 6 months of executive coaching. And then a year of a team of global advisors who are your personal board of directors. All of those elements combined are pretty magical. But if you can't go through a fellowship right now, get yourself an executive coach. Yeah. Find some other women leading like you and put a mastermind together, a mastermind group. Nobody pays any money. It's a framework for you to support each other's leadership consistently. Mm-hmm. And then the other thing is ask a couple people to be on your personal board of advisors. Yeah. That the combination of that will up-game your leadership dramatically.
Yep, you can do it. And my global advisors have already become such an important part of my life and the livelihood of our company. And so awesome. I just can't thank you enough. We're going to be growing. And I know a lot of it is because of my experience with you. So I want to thank you for spending time today with me on our very first Let's Talk Leadership. It's so timely to have you, Julie. And thank you for all the great work that you're doing for so many women. You are touching lives. You're changing the conversation. And we really appreciate you and all of what you and your team do.
Thank you for having me.
Pleasure. Again, I'm Kristin Judge. This was the Let's Talk Leadership, the very first inaugural edition, and I am the CEO and founder of the Cybercrime Support Network. If you are having issues with cybercrime and online fraud, please visit fraudsupport.org for help, and we'll see you again tomorrow on Cyber Threat Thursday. Thanks so much.